From a Welsh band that basically invented thrash before Metallica knew how to hold a pick, to a psych prog supergroup lost to the shadows, to an album so rare it became stoner metal's holy grail. These are the 15 obscure rock bands from the 70s you need to hear. And one of them? Let's just say, they laid down riffs so heavy they had to be rediscovered on bootlegs before anyone believed they actually existed. If you think you know 70s rock, buckle up. These are the bands your favorite bands were secretly listening to. Number 1. Budgie. If Black Sabbath were the fathers of metal, Budgie were the crazy uncles nobody talks about, but absolutely should. Formed in Wales, Budgie dropped their debut in 1971 and came in swinging. Their riffs were monstrous, their grooves tight, and Burke Shelley's high-pitched vocals added a wild, unmistakable twist. They weren't just heavy, they were weird, fast, and experimental, blending Sabbath-style doom with something looser, funkier, and totally unique. Their track Bread Fan became legendary years later thanks to Metallica's cover, but real heads know the deep cuts. In for the Kill, Crash Course in Brain Surgery, Napoleon Bonaparte 1 and 2. The songs were gnarly, complex, and way ahead of their time. Despite the influence, Budgie never broke big in the States. But if you ask bands like Iron Maiden, Soundgarden, or even Van Halen, Budgie were the real deal. They didn't just influence metal, they inspired it. And while Budgie delivered speed and swagger, the next band twisted psychedelia into progressive explosions, with a lineup that looked like a supergroup and played like one too. Number 2. Captain Beyond. Captain Beyond was built to blow minds, and they succeeded. Formed by members of Deep Purple, Iron Butterfly, and Johnny Winter's band, this was a supergroup in theory, but a cosmic explosion in practice. Their 1972 self-titled debut is a start-to-finish prog psych hard rock masterpiece, filled with shifting time signatures, tempo changes, and riffs that snap your neck sideways. Songs like Dancing Madly Backwards and Raging River of Fear sound like they were written during a fever dream in deep space, but they groove hard. Rod Evans, ex-Deep Purple, delivers vocals like a man chasing demons, while the rhythm section keeps everything in tight formation. It's complex, but it never gets lost in itself. That's the secret sauce. They were weird, but they still rocked. Captain Beyond never got the commercial success they deserved, too heavy for prog purists, too complex for stoners. But their cult fan base? Loyal for life. And while Captain Beyond charted new galaxies, the next band kept it raw and grounded, crafting an album so rare and heavy it became a blueprint for an entire underground genre. Number 3. Leaf Hound. This is the band your favorite doom and stoner rock artists wish they could be. Leaf Hound's 1971 album, Growers of Mushroom, barely made a blip when it dropped. But over time, it became a collector's grail, and a full-blown influence on everyone from Cayuse to Orange Goblin. Their sound? Heavy blues with a mean fuzz tone, crushing riffs and vocals that drip with menace. It's Zeppelin-esque, but darker, dirtier, and more underground. Tracks like Freelance Fiend hit with proto-metal swagger, while the deeper cuts feel like a mushroom-fueled punch to the chest. They came out of the UK hard rock scene, dropped one masterpiece, then vanished. But the ripples they left behind were massive. Original pressings of Growers of Mushroom have sold for thousands, and it's not hype. The album slays, and real heads know it. And if Hound took you deep into the heavy blues swamp, the next band dragged you into a European doom spiral, fusing prog with dark atmospheres and crushing riffs before anyone knew what to call it. Number 4. Lucifers Friend. Don't let the name scare you off, unless you're afraid of seriously heavy riffs and doom-laced prog fire. Formed in Germany with a British frontman, John Lawton, who'd later sing for Uriah Heep, Lucifer's Friend dropped their self-titled debut in 1970, and it was absolutely crushing. Think early Sabbath vibes, but with more organ, more dynamics, and a haunting theatrical edge. Tracks like Ride the Sky open with blaring horns before diving into proto-metal thunder. Their sound was dark, dramatic, and complex, blending classic heavy rock with progressive shifts and psych textures. Despite being pioneers in this emerging heavy scene, they got almost zero attention outside Europe. But over the years, musicians started tracing their influence. And what did they find? A blueprint for doom, early power metal, and gothic prog, all decades before those genres fully existed. Lucifer's Friend didn't follow trends. They forged darkness into melody and let the world catch up later. And if their prog doom mix sounds intense, the next band went even rawer, throwing distortion and chaos into proto-metal that sounded like it came from the depths of a volcano. Number 5. Sir Lord Baltimore. One spin of Kingdom Come and you'll understand. This wasn't just heavy rock, this was the sound of metal being born. Sir Lord Baltimore dropped their debut in 1970, and it was pure sonic aggression. With walls of fuzz, galloping drums, and vocals that felt like a preacher losing his mind, these guys were blasting riffs before most bands even knew what distortion could really do. Their sound was raw, chaotic, and loud. Tracks like Master Heartache and Hound feel like proto-thrash decades before thrash existed. In fact, Cream magazine was one of the first publications to describe this band as, you guessed it, heavy metal. They burned fast and bright, with 2 albums and a legacy that went mostly unnoticed, until the metal underground dug them up and elevated them to cult legend status. They didn't care about polish, they cared about power, and they delivered. And while Sir Lord Baltimore brought raw fury, the next band brought precision. A short-lived supergroup that sounded like Led Zeppelin taking a sharp turn into prog territory. Number 6. Armageddon. They only released 1 album, but it hits like a wrecking ball made of granite and stardust. Formed by ex-members of the Yardbirds, Captain Beyond, and Renaissance, Armageddon were a short-lived British-American band who dropped one absolute monster of a record in 1975. It had everything: Zeppelin-sized riffs, complex arrangements, and Keith Relf's gritty vocals laid over galloping rhythms and seismic guitar work. Tracks like Buzzard and Paths and Planes and Future Gains feel like proto-power metal colliding with prog and psychedelic thunder. Critics barely noticed. Promotion was weak. And with Relf's tragic death the following year, the band faded into obscurity. But over time, that self-titled LP became a buried treasure in the heavy rock underground. It's tight, aggressive, and melodic. The kind of record that makes you wonder, how the hell did this not blow up? And while Armageddon vanished in a blaze of unrealized potential, the next band stuck around just long enough to drop a few bombs, including one with a drummer who'd later help fuel punk history. Number 7. Dust. Before punk had its Ramones, Dust had its Mark Bell, who, would later become Marky Ramone. But long before CBGBs and leather jackets, this dude was pounding the drums in one of the heaviest underground bands of the early 70s. Dust dropped 2 albums, their 1971 self-titled debut and 1972's Hard Attack. Both are packed with bluesy distortion, snarling vocals, and proto-metal energy that hits like mountain jamming with Sabbath. The guitar work? Absolutely filthy. Richie Wise laid down riffs that didn't just groove, they growled. And while they had no radio hits, tracks like From a Dry Camel and Learning to Die became secret weapons for crate diggers and collectors who knew the real deal. Dust weren't chasing the mainstream. They were too heavy, too raw, and too soon. But they left a fossil imprint that future genres like stoner rock, doom, and punk would excavate and worship. And while Dust brought American fury, the next band gave us just one record. But it was such a perfect storm of Sabbath thunder and bluesy soul, it became a cult classic almost overnight. Number 8. Highway Robbery. They only made one album, but what an album it was. For Love or Money, released in 1972, is a front-to-back power trio masterclass. Equal parts Sabbath-style heaviness, Grand Funk Railroad grit, and cream-like swagger. And still, almost no one talks about Highway Robbery. The band laid down some of the nastiest grooves you'll ever hear in an obscure rock LP. The opener, Mystery Rider, sets the tone with relentless energy. But it's tracks like Lazy Woman and Promotion Man that prove these guys had hooks and attitude. There's no filler here. Every song punches hard, and the production, especially for such a small release, still sounds huge today. Why didn't they take off? Who knows? Maybe the world just wasn't ready. But today, Highway Robbery is considered one of the greatest lost hard rock albums of the 70s. And if you think one obscure album was intense, wait until you hear about the next band, who made doom metal before it had a name and did it with spine-chilling vocals to match. Number 9. Bang. If you like early Sabbath, you need to know Bang. This Pennsylvania power trio dropped their self-titled debut in 1971, and it's packed with slow-burning doom riffs, eerie harmonies, and a vibe that could clear the sunshine out of any California day. Tracks like Lions, Christians, and Questions ooze dread, but it's the overall sound, thick, deliberate, ominous, that makes Bang a true proto-doom gem. Frankie Gilkin's guitar tone is pure vintage sludge, while Frank Ferrara's vocals cut through like a stone preacher on a mountaintop. They weren't metal yet, but they were close. In fact, Bang are often cited alongside bands like Pentagram and Sir Lord Baltimore as the link between 70s hard rock and what would become doom metal in the 80s. Their label fumbled promotion, radio didn't get it, but Bang persisted, and their legacy slowly snowballed into cult legend status. And while Bang dragged you into darkness, the next band brought a spark of Midwest fire, with big choruses, flashy solos, and an album title that told you everything you needed to know. Number 10. Kane.
Have you seen me walking?
You ever stumble on a band that makes you say, "How have I never heard this before?" That's Kane. Hailing from Minnesota, Kane's 1975 album, A Pound of Flesh, is an underground heavy rock rager. full of shredding solos, crunchy riffs, and vocals that feel like a Viking sermon shouted through a Marshall stack. It kicks off with Queen of the Night, a track that sounds like Deep Purple collided with early Judas Priest. Then it just keeps delivering. Melody, speed, and that unmistakable 70s danger. They didn't hold back. The band's musicianship is razor sharp, especially for a group with virtually no label push. They toured hard, opened for big names, and earned a local reputation, but never cracked the national radar. Today, A Pound of Flesh is a cult favorite among vinyl collectors and early metal fans. It's obscure, but once you hear it, you won't forget it. And while Kane brought Midwest metal muscle, the next group mixed psychedelia, boogie, and blues into a wild ride that feels like a truck stop bar fight in audio form. Number 11, Stray.
Making walls crumble, making all of Jericho tumble to the ground.
If Thin Lizzy had taken acid and cranked the amps to 11, they might have sounded like Stray. This British band hit the scene in 1970 with a fiery mix of blues-infused hard rock and psychedelic riffing, powered by Del Bromham's monster guitar tone and fearless songwriting. Their debut album features Suicide, a track that lives up to its title in rawness and intensity. But the whole record is stacked. All in Your Mind would later be covered by Iron Maiden, and Move On shows just how tight and versatile this group really was. Stray never hit the big time, partly because they didn't fit in a neat box. Too heavy for the hippies, too weird for the hard rock purists. But that's exactly what made them special. They were wild, experimental, and totally unafraid. And if Stray were bending genres in the UK, the next band was taking funk, soul, and heavy riffs and tossing it into a blender with one of the greatest voices in hard rock before he joined Deep Purple. Number 12, Trapeze.
The hands of your sisters and the brothers that you meet, we're all together. I hope you're feeling fine.
Before Glenn Hughes became the voice of Deep Purple's Mark III lineup, he was already melting faces in Trapeze. This power trio blended funk, soul, blues, and hard rock into a sound that was groovy, gritty, and surprisingly futuristic. Their 1970 album Medusa is a lost classic, with Hughes's vocals soaring over wah-drenched guitar lines and syncopated rhythms. Tracks like Black Cloud and the title track show off their ability to move between heavy jams and delicate passages, all without losing intensity. It was music you could headbang and dance to, and that's a rare combo. While they were bigger in the UK than in the States, Trapeze influenced tons of hard rock acts that came after. You can hear shades of their sound in bands like Mother's Finest, Living Colour, and even Red Hot Chili Peppers. They never fully broke through, but the bones of what they did still rattle inside modern rock. And while Trapeze laid down the funk metal foundation, the next band got straight up primal. With a debut album so raw, even Deep Purple's Ian Gillan had to get involved. Number 13, Jerusalem.
Down to the city, get some things for my guitar.
If you ever wanted to hear what early metal sounded like before it had a name, Jerusalem is it. This British band dropped one gnarly, no-frills album in 1972, produced by none other than Ian Gillan of Deep Purple. The sound? Ugly, raw, glorious. Their self-titled record was loose, heavy, and aggressive in a way that most bands at the time were too scared to attempt. Songs like Frustration and Primitive Man feel like a pub brawl on vinyl, full of distortion, shouted vocals, and a chaotic energy that hints at punk, doom, and even sludge years before those genres existed. Jerusalem didn't polish their sound, they let it bleed. Gillan himself said the band had raw energy and guts. And he wasn't kidding. They didn't care about radio singles. They were there to rip. The album flopped commercially, but decades later it resurfaced as a cult classic among metalheads, garage freaks, and anyone who likes their rock unfiltered and unhinged. And while Jerusalem kicked up noise in the UK, the next band was turning Swiss psych into something downright volcanic, with one of the most aggressive power trio sounds you've never heard. Number 14. Toad. Toad. One word. 3 guys. Absolute thunder. Hailing from Switzerland, Toad were a heavy psych blues power trio who cranked their amps and let the fuzz fly. Their 1971 self-titled debut was already gritty, but it's 1972's Tomorrow Blue that really cemented them as underground legends. Vic Verjeet's guitar tone is filthy. The band shifts between slow-burning jams and full-on freakouts, with solos that feel like they're tearing open the sky. Tracks like Fly and Blind Chaplain showcase their range, soulful, raw, and loud as hell. But it's the overall intensity that sticks. Toad didn't sound like a European band. They sounded like a biker gang trapped in a volcano with a wah pedal. They were never marketed right, and their records remained hard to find, which only added to their legend. Now, collectors and fuzz fiends know Toad is the real deal. And while Toad delivered Swiss fire, our final entry came out of Cleveland with a vocalist who wailed like Robert Plant and riffs that could have melted stadium walls if anyone had been listening. Number 15. Granicus last, but nowhere near least. Granicus might just be the best Zeppelin-influenced band you've never heard. This Cleveland group dropped one album in 1973, and it's a wild mix of bluesy hard rock, proto-prog ambition, and sky-high falsettos from singer Woody Leffel, who sounds like Robert Plant after chain-smoking and time-traveling. Tracks like You're in America and Prayer hit with huge dynamics, moving from quiet introspection to full-on explosive climaxes. The guitar work is searing, the rhythm section locked in, and the band had range. They could groove, shred, or break your heart. Why didn't Granicus blow up? Bad timing, no label support, and the fact that hard rock was oversaturated at the time, but they were better than half the bands that made it. Today, their self-titled LP is a secret handshake among collectors, and a lesson in how many great bands slip through the cracks. These were the 15 obscure rock bands from the 70s you need to hear. Buried gems, underground legends, and heavy-hitting pioneers who shaped the sound without ever taking the spotlight. Which one blew your mind the most? Drop a comment and let us know if you already knew some of these names, or just found your next favorite riff machine. Make sure to subscribe and share this video with a real rockhead who lives for deep cuts and forgotten fire. And if you thought this was a trip through the shadows, you've got to see what was bubbling in the underground during the 80s. Click the video on screen for 15 obscure rock bands from the 80s you need to hear.